Welcome to Newsroom, brought to you by Insurance Brokers Alliance. And this is where we talk about everything going on in the country and overseas as well, from the perspective of our panel, who tonight is... Welcome back, Carolyn Dean.
Thank you, Bill.
Always nice to have you.
Oh, thank you.
And of course, Tom Conroy, who you will all recognise.
Thank you, Bill.
Good job. Yeah, just pointing it out.
Good evening, Karen.
Good evening, Tom.
Been a lot in the news lately. I mean, it just seems to be pouring like rain from heaven on us from Wellington. Of course, the big one, Tom, this week has been Ian Sutton resigning. Roger Sutton resigning, and of course made worse, or whatever you want to say about it, really by the press conference that followed and the seemingly very looseness of the State Services Commission and their comments. Who was allowed to be at the press conference? All kinds of things seem to be pretty unusual.
I think it was a difficult situation because he wasn't actually found guilty of anything, and that left them in sort of no man's land where you can't just shunt them aside and speak on their behalf. He's not guilty, and so he was given an opportunity to speak for himself. It's a very difficult one to be judgmental on because you don't know the details and the circumstances. He does admit that he acted inappropriately at times. Maybe he's a touchy-feely guy and he got carried away with it. Maybe it was worse than that, we don't know, but it obviously didn't get to the point where it was sanctioned to the point of being dismissed. So it's very difficult to say, is he in the right or wrong. It appeared from all reports to have done a good job in a very difficult situation over a number of years, but his behaviour perhaps needs to be regulated a little more closer in future. As to I didn't have a big deal with the conference. I mean, was it really necessary to have such a big hoo-ha about it? Why couldn't they just have announced it and let it go? And why did they have to have a press conference? Why can't you just put out a press release? Roger Sutton's decided we've agreed that it's time for him to step down. It's by mutual agreement, which it was, and leave it at that. But of course, as soon as you start holding a press conference, that's when you start attracting all that attention and criticism. And of course, one thing leads to another and it escalates, I think, beyond their control. Andrew
Little, the new Labour leader, of course, has said that Ian Rennie should really, he should resign. He's saying there's incompetence here and all kinds of things. Is it that bad?
No, that was just cheap, trying to score some early points as the new leader of the Labour Party, and I'll come to that later, but we'll just see what Carolyn thought of it. So what was your impression of the way it was handled?
I think it's not actually accurate to say he wasn't found guilty, because he was found guilty after a 7-week investigation of serious misconduct, and he resigned. Not to the point of being a sackable offence? Because he resigned. Yeah, so serious misconduct can be a sackable offence. Right. But there was an opportunity for that because he decided to jump, basically.
You reckon he condemned himself?
It's certainly a different interpretation than I had. I think they said, okay, you've done wrong, but it wasn't quite bad enough to sack. But it might,
7-week investigation, and then the outcome was, serious misconduct. So he you can be sacked.
Yeah, may or may not be. That's correct. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So I think he sort of jumped before he got into a more awkward situation, and maybe part of that is it not coming out. Now there's no opportunity for any more details to really come out, because I don't think it's serious misconduct. If you're hugging people and calling them honey and sweetie, I don't think that's serious misconduct.
So you're saying there's more to it than meets the eye?
Could be more to it.
It did seem that there were a lot of unsaid facts.
And the complainant didn't get her say, did she?
Well, that's the issue.
Which seems unfair.
That's the issue with the press conference.
Yes.
I think in terms of a $500,000 salaried person leaving Sarah, that is worthy of a press conference, because you can manage it at least that way. But the fact that he was there and some high level, members of government,
Kibble White is going to come in and take his job.
Right. So there were some high level people there that gave the impression of him being supported by this sort of boys' club, and the fact that the complainant wasn't there, obviously she didn't get any chance to say anything anywhere along the line, whereas Roger Sutton had a chance to to express himself and be emotional about it. I think makes it very difficult for her, and also for people in the future who want to come forward in a situation like that. They don't want, that's a very uncomfortable position to end up in. It's, it's all become public. And
someone made the point the conference was dominated to in the end by his wife, who was a journalist of some repute in her own right, which was interesting as well.
And Andrew Kibblewhite sat beside the wife, and so I think it was.
And then there was more hugging went on too, which.
And the hugging came out again, and Ian Rennie was recommended by his director of communications not to do the press conference. So in her view, in her professional view, it was not a professional way.
Ian Rennie went against the recommendation of his press advisor.
And she's now on sick leave and hasn't been able to be contacted.
Oh dear. Now, from a female point of view, there's been a few claims made of the nature that it will now be more difficult for women to report sexual harassment because a precedent has been set.
I don't understand that. I'm still a little bit lost on that. In what regard? Why would it be more difficult?
That it will be ignored, perhaps.
But they acted upon it.
Belittled.
She complained, they acted upon it. There was a 7-week inquiry, and then there was an outcome.
Yeah. The claim has been made. Women are making that claim. Whether it's true or not, that's.
But why? Why is it now difficult? What do you think?
One reason is that it was a 7-week inquiry, and he stayed on.
Right.
And so for 7 weeks, this inquiry's going on, and he was there and she was there.
Right.
Which was probably extremely awkward.
So they should both be stood down until the inquiry is.
I think possibly. I don't know what correct procedure is.
I'm just trying to think what is a fair procedure. If you're going to stand before the trial's finished, you either both stand down or you both neither. Perhaps.
Yeah,
One wonders why
possibly.
it took 7 weeks.
That's the other criticism.
I agree with that bit. That is.
And can you stand somebody down if they're just being inquired into or not found guilty? Can you stand them down from their job? Because if you stand them down, I mean that sends a big message, doesn't it?
That makes.
Well, you would normally, like in the instance of, and we're going to talk about it later, but the police officer in Ferguson, he was stood down pending the inquiry. So
could it be based on the potential severity of the act? I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah,
I'm not sure. Ends.
I'm not sure about the other question of what. I mean, I think a press conference and everything becoming very public like that, and then it looking like the support for the person who's been complained against does make it hard for you to complain against someone. It's
a press conference often precedes a circus.
Yes.
And you're setting yourself up for one. It's very hard to manage properly when there's so many parties involved. To be fair to all parties, and then who said they wanted to come and who said they didn't want to come. I just think they made it difficult for themselves by staging such an elaborate affair when it could have been done a lot more discreetly, I think. For all parties concerned, not just for.
I think it was John Drinnan of the Herald who made the comment or repeated the comment that it seemed very loose, the whole thing, and was not properly managed. So that was the opinion of those who obviously attended a few of these things. And you would have thought that with it being such an important conference, or such an important thing that was actually happening here, you got the director of the State Services Commission, you got Ian Rennie there, you've got the leaving head of SERA there, you've got the incoming head of SERA, that it was kind of being played by ear almost, and opportunities for his wife to speak as well. Very strange.
Perhaps there's no manual for how to deal.
I think so, and especially it's really hard for us because we don't know what we don't know. And to put there might have been mitigating reasons to have that have been hidden or can't be disclosed for some reason for both parties' protection. So it's hard to say, but I just think you've made it difficult for themselves, and there's been a bit of aftermath, and you have to live with it if you stage the party.
Right. Moving on to other things the government has had to explain lately. We've had the report back and with claims that Judith Collins has been exonerated and found not guilty, etc. But the Glynn report basically says that there should be an apology go to Phil Goff. Now this has been hotly disputed in the House today, with John Key saying that he accepts the report but doesn't necessarily agree with it. And the words contesting the report has been used. I did read somewhere that there were files missing from Judith Collins' computer. Stuff seemed to be not there. Emails were missing from a certain time period and a few other things like that, which made me think, well, being a Minister of the Crown and the files no longer accessible, that there might have been a backup somewhere. Or perhaps they're not that so technologically advanced. The Ministers of the Crown back their computers up. Who knows? What did you think about it, Carolyn, the whole debacle there?
So which one are we talking about?
We're
the
talking-
Judith Collins or the...
Well, we're basically talking about we're talking about that report that has come over the entire affair there and was being debated in Parliament today. Well, it'd be good to talk about Judith Collins as well.
So Judith Collins is happy day for her.
Happy day for her.
Happy day for her. She is cleared of whatever the terminology was, collusion or naughty, general naughtiness.
That's right.
To do with
general naughtiness.
General naughtiness to do with the head of the SFO and undermining
that's
him.
right.
And Cameron Slade has taken the fall, basically. That was my interpretation
That's
of
right.
it anyway.
Yes.
And he's apologised to Judith. And then the Gwyn, is it the Cheryl
Yes.
Gwyn? So she is the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security, and she has done a report into the SIS Goff issue.
Affair.
And today, the SIS, I think it was today, have apologised.
Yesterday she apologised,
Yesterday, right.
directly
Right.
to Goff. And the question is should
Goff.
John Key apologise? That's the question.
This was what's
Yeah.
being debated in Parliament today, and Andrew Little demanding, of course, just cut the crap and apologise. But John Key was obfuscating the whole thing and saying, well, he didn't necessarily agree. He seemed to be accepting Cameron Slater's position rather than the position of the report. Of course, that became a topic of some intense discussion across the House as well.
Well, John Key's effectively saying, the media are saying to John Key, oh, so you've been called out, or this report says that Phil Goff was right, and then that must mean you're wrong. And John Key's saying, what are you talking about? I've done nothing wrong. My staff have done nothing wrong. There was no collusion. There was no wrongdoing. This report says so. The only wrongdoing was the SIS. And
Who have apologised.
Who have apologised. And so John Key's effectively saying, well, this is a non-issue.
And I agree with them. I think
you
the
think so?
apology's been done. You get carried away with apologies. Who says what? An apology's been done by the department at fault. Just because he's in charge of the department, well, he's effectively in charge of every department at the government, isn't he? Indirectly or directly.
Yeah.
And I don't think it needs a second. It's not a big enough issue. Surely they could spend time in Parliament debating far more important issues to the economy and to our well-being
do you think it was another
than
one
some
where-
silly apology.
Do you think it was another one where Andrew Little was making the most of an opportunity to have a go at the Prime Minister, Tom?
I think so, and he embarrassed himself in doing so.
Yeah.
Tried to be...
There was lad, and he...
and I thought that showed a lack of composure.
He looked like a bit of a baby.
He did, and he was trying to be strong. I felt very embarrassed for him. I just thought, come on, it's not even that big an issue. You're trying to make it, you're trying to be strong. It just looked like a child having a tantrum, and that's not constructive.
But Tom, do you still not think, because I think from last time you said people speak to the media and bloggers are just the same and it's not an issue, do you still not think that it's an issue that the SIS gave information to the Prime Minister's staff who G'd up Cameron Slater with that information and then to make an official inquiry? Do you still think that that's okay? That sort of...
No, it's not okay, but I think it's been sorted. Okay, the people who have done wrong have been outed, an apology's been made. That's it. This is not world-breaking issue. There weren't great secrets that exposed us to foreign entities. It was a relatively small issue. There were some protocols that were broken and have now been put right, so we believe. An apology's been made. Move on, is what I say. There's got to be other things that are far more important. And I don't think spending half a day at taxpayers' expense debating whether John Key says sorry. He said he's not going to say sorry. That's the end of it. Thank you very much. Let's just kick on, please.
And everybody's gone. Everyone in that whole
They're
issue.
gone.
It's
They have.
2011 that
Yep.
we're actually talking about.
Judith's gone.
Another reason to
Everyone's
move on.
gone except John Key.
Exactly right.
So
Probably the only
don't
point
get it.
that has been made out of the whole thing was that the SIS, I think was probably what people have been worried about, should never be used by the ruling party to gain an advantage over the opposition or any other politician.
Yeah.
They cannot use that service to get for one-upmanship. And I think
that's the problem.
there was a bit of that going on there.
Were the politicians using the service, or were the administration using the service?
I think that it was Warren Tucker who was the director.
Warren Tucker
at the time.
was in charge. Warren Tucker was in charge of the SIS, but the guy de Joux was a political appointment in the Prime Minister's office. He was the deputy man there, I think. So he was a political appointment. So, yeah, he could. And there's some questions, therefore, as to whether he should have been the person perhaps receiving some of this information. But from 2008, John Key passed over the part of the responsibility of dealing with the SIS to those people in his office. Whereas before, every contact with the SIS had been with the Prime Minister themselves. It was probably a sensible thing to do, actually, but there is a glitch now has been shown here. And I think that future Prime Ministers, including him, will probably be a bit tighter on it, because it could have caused him even more embarrassment, really. I think he's got off lightly. Cameron Slater hasn't.
No, that Cameron
I think
Slater's
he's the big
taking
loser,
the
isn't he?
fall for everybody this week.
So what's he lost? Is it going to stop people reading his blog, which is all he wants?
I suppose, if you think it in those terms, no, he's lost nothing.
No.
He might have actually made some gains.
People might have a look to see what else
Did
he's
you
got
know
that
who
he shouldn't have.
Did you ever read Cameron Slater's blog? Or
Never
know
knew
who
he existed.
Yeah, but yeah, you didn't know he existed before this. You do now.
It's fine.
I knew he did.
You knew he
But
did.
I don't go. I'm not a blog reader, so
No.
it doesn't bother me. But I think it's going to increase the traffic. They might think he may have other salacious stuff to share that he shouldn't have. That's why I say I don't think he's the loser, because he's there to stir the pot, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
And
gained
boy,
infamy.
Well, and that's really what he set out to do, is to be infamous and to get people talking and debating. And I don't think that's going to change.
Perhaps it's one of those. Perhaps it's one of those things where we say all publicity is good publicity.
For Cameron Slater, maybe, yeah.
Well, people know who he is now.
Yeah.
Gliding back to Andrew Little. How has he done, Carolyn, in his first week, really, as Labor leader?
Well, I sort of agree with Tom in this last, little period, maybe day or two. He blew up, and maybe that would have been okay, except for the fact that John Key is so good at pouring cold water on things. So if you've got someone pouring cold water on things and someone trying to fan the flames, it's already gone out.
That's right.
You end up looking silly. So I think that not so good. But prior to that, he seems like a good
solid.
He seems knowledgeable. He's got this background in law. He's got this background, comes from the union, so he's got this connection with people. And he said that he's going to basically leave Annette King sort of at home doing the home jobs while he goes out and speaks to people, and so
I don't think it's going to help.
It's been described as boring, Tom.
Well, what surprised me was the very fine margin of victory. It was less than 1%, wasn't it?
Some are saying it's not a victory.
I would, if it's the party for me, I'd go back until you had someone getting 75% of the vote, and just make them just look. This is indecisive. We'll look indecisive by having a 50 and a 49.9, and it means half the people don't want you. That's difficult. It's a tenuous place to start with, and they wanted someone who was entirely different. It wasn't like two like people. We're talking about Robertson and Little, who are completely different in their whole view and their whole approach and their way they present themselves. So I was surprised that they settled for such a fine margin, and especially with someone who's lost a few elections on his own right, has not had traction with the people before. So I thought that was a bit of a gamble, and I thought it was a bit old worldy to go back to sort of the union connection. So I was surprised. I know that he was tipped as the favourite, but I thought they could have, there was a chance there to do something new, fresh. And I don't think he's an endearing personality. He doesn't win people over. He might have the knowledge, but I thought those first few weeks in office, it was all about being nice, working away, and just waiting to pick your targets. Not the first thing, grab that reading article and jump on that because that happens to be the news of the day, and then get all upset about not apologies and things. That just pick your battles, because you're trying to score points on things that, at the end of the day, are going to be forgotten about in 6 months' time. You've got, I think his, misdirection was what I'd be concerned with. So I'd say not a good start.
And he was really aggressive, like his language in Parliament was very aggressive, which wasn't just an aggressive position to take, but he said, what did he call John Key? Something about the dog back.
It was something
some kind of fighting dog.
Yeah, and it was vile and terrible. And this issue wasn't about that kind of emotive language. It was, if you're talking about something serious, then by all means dress it up. But I thought wrong target, wrong approach.
I mean, love him or hate him, whatever, John Key is a formidable opponent.
It's become so, not at the beginning. He's worked his way and he's been clever because he was a numbers man and I don't think entirely comfortable in front of, in the debate type issue, but he's become very skilled at it. He's had some good, and I was a critic at the beginning. I thought he'd said a few wrong things, but just showed you he learned very, very quickly, and he's an intelligent guy, and he's learned how to win an argument. And the old philosophy of, as you say, play it down, throw cold water in as quickly as possible, move on, try and move on. And 99 times out of 100 that works quite effectively. It did for Helen Clark for many years.
And I'll tell you what else works effectively is being out of the country whenever anything goes down.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't there.
I wasn't
there.
And handing over, like you said, he handed over liaison with the SIS to
Wasn't
someone
my
else.
fault,
So now
they
we
did
can
it.
say, well, they were doing it. Not
Correct.
actually. A lot of employers would have to, they would need to take responsibility for whatever their staff were doing. But he doesn't, and he gets away with it.
Yeah.
They did it,
Now, what about his shadow cabinet, Tom? What, are they effective? Now, he's put Robertson in as finance minister. I thought it was a good choice.
Appeasement, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's the least interesting political announcements ever, is the announcement of a shadow cabinet, because they are powerless, they're just spokespeople, they have no real impact.
They get more money.
They get practice in the event that they might get into Parliament one day, but you'd have to say it's a long way off for Parliament. So I don't really, it doesn't matter who you put there. I think it's all going to come down to how well Little performs or his successor before the next election.
The deputy leader issue is going to be a very difficult one because, quite frankly, looking through, I don't see anybody who can naturally rise into that position. What do you reckon? Is there anybody there?
Isn't it Annette King?
Temporary, 1 year.
Temporary at the moment. I mean, they're looking for someone else.
That's a clever move.
Yeah. But someone else has got to come forward.
Right.
So that's going to be nagging away, gnawing away in the shadows.
And perhaps the natural deputies were with those who were rivals, and that's always, you don't want them to outshine you, so you've got to be very careful.
Having said all that, we're going to take a break. Stay with us, we'll be back. We've got lots more to talk about. International now, and news is not all good. The grand jury has come down with their decision, Tom. They've decided not to indict Officer Wilson. There were riots on the street before that. Now we're looking at a situation which has got so much danger of getting out of control. They've actually called out the National Guard, and of course this is against American citizens who might be riding. President Obama has come online basically and said, look, this destruction of property, torching of cars and whatever is just not on you. These are criminal acts and you should be charged, but I do understand because I've been there, done that. How are they going to handle this situation?
It's happened before, and it will die down after a while. Unfortunately, it'll always come to a head when there's a colour clash, whichever way around it is. And that's, if he'd shot a young white boy, would anyone be protesting, whether it be right or wrong? They wouldn't be, would they? Possibly not. Or a black cop kills a black child.
Yes.
And again, it would be dismay and there'd be concern and there'd be good feelings for the family, sad feelings for the family. But there wouldn't be the furore. And I don't know whether you just, after centuries of those clashes, you're suddenly going to quell it. My impression is it's not quite as bad at this stage as some of the earlier incidences in Los Angeles. I can't remember when that was, but there was
Florida.
In Florida. There's been a few in the past. So, but I always feel for the families that are caught in the middle. If somebody's lost a child, it's tough for the police families as well. So although they're embroiled in the middle.
And the boy's father had come out and appealed to the people, He had even made an appeal from his point of view. Please, no nonsense.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult situation. They put out all the evidence about what the policeman does in those circumstances. I think they've got video of the boy in the shop stealing some stuff and pushing people around.
So he wasn't innocent.
He wasn't just walking down the street.
No.
But there is a situation. It's very tense. Everyone's on their edge, and decisions are made split-second decisions. And you've got guns. And that's always the anti-gun lobby is saying if there were no guns involved, there would have been a scuffle perhaps, but there wouldn't have been a death. So
it was clearly a wrong decision to shoot the boy. I mean, I don't
think he's denying that. I don't think there's any denial on that. It's just whether it was a wrong decision or it was just criminal, which is what he's been cleared of. Right. But very difficult to fix, and I think they're doing quite a good job in trying to minimise it. But you just can't ask people to stop, and they're not just going to stop. Some people are joining in. I think you always get that impression, don't you? Some people are joining in because there's a chance to be rebellious.
Well, that's what's sprung to my mind.
Worries me.
I in the midst of it all, you have feelings both ways. You think, this cop should be, something drastic should happen to him for being so careless in execution of his duty. And then you think, well, there are those other people who really, I mean, if you question them, you probably find that some of them couldn't care less one way or the other, taking the opportunity to be destructive and to wreck things, break things, or whatever. When in actual fact they really are not your true civil rights type protester. Those ones certainly are there, and long live them. I mean, without that kind of civil rights protest, the United States wouldn't be where it is today, neither would any of us. What did you feel about it, Carolyn?
Well, it's been going on for over 100 days now, this whole episode. I watched prior to the grand jury decision coming out, I was watching over that period of time, and there's quite a few exacerbating factors in this whole scenario. One being that they held that decision over for 8 hours after it was made, and so people were standing around,
getting agitated,
building up a crowd.
I wonder why they did that.
For 8 hours. Well, they had some reasons, but I think some other exacerbating factors are that the policeman shot 12 times. And it's hard to understand that. Like, you might understand someone getting charged at and shoot once or twice, but it's hard to understand 12 times.
It looks like a policeman out of control, doesn't it? Just, I'm going to finish this guy off. I'm going to kill him.
Well, he had come from he had been called out, and he had gone to, he was with a small child that needed medical assistance in some kind of apartment building. So he was leaving there, and on his way back from there, he saw Michael Brown, and he recognised him from the description, and he and another guy were walking down the middle of the road, which was odd behaviour. And so then he pulled his truck up, his police vehicle up, and some kind of altercation happened at the window, and it sounded from what the grand jury found that it was probably that Michael Brown punched him through into the vehicle. So at that point, he's obviously dealing with someone violent. I don't know if he knew. He probably didn't know that he didn't have a gun. So that's the other issue. But like I say, to shoot someone 12 times, that's the really exacerbating factor. Yes. And then underlying tensions between law enforcement and, as Obama said, communities of colour, like that's always underlying the sort of thing. I think, but the grand jury is a group of people who had already been brought together well before this happened, and they were in charge of going through screeds of information, and a lot of the accounts were
conflicting.
And the really hard part about it, I think, in this instance, is social media, because what happened was people said he had his hands up, and or he was running away, and or he was shot in the back. And I don't think any of that turned out to necessarily. He definitely wasn't shot in the back. He wasn't running away.
Irrevocable folk legend, doesn't it?
Everybody's sort of. That's where all the conflict came from. Was these social media accounts. So all these exacerbating factors have made this a lot worse.
And what those people don't realise is that they're actually perhaps reducing the chance of the charge of sticking, because it's giving whoever's deciding a preconceived view, it's muddying the facts, it's throwing some red herrings out to the point where they're saying, well, there's too much conflict. Well, if you just waited, and perhaps the result may have gone in your favour, but they're on there trying to force something to happen, and in fact having the reverse effect.
Interestingly, too, that it wasn't as though that somebody within the police decided not to charge him. It was a grand jury.
That's exactly it.
It wasn't
an internal inquiry.
No. This is the
It
grand
was.
jury is well an institution in the United States and seen as being extremely fair and inquisitory. So
They
and
gave
they're
months.
citizens.
They gave months of their time to go through as much everything, and at the end of the day, they take the physical evidence and they take the accounts that they've been given, and they match up as best they can with what actually happened, and they can get an angle on whether accounts. Some people are reliable because it matches the physical evidence, and some are completely unreliable. So there's a lot of work went into that investigation, and it's not the only one. There's now the federal investigation's been parallel to that, and that's ongoing.
And that's an investigation into he could be charged with civil rights violations.
Right.
The policeman, couldn't he? And so on a federal level,
And then after that, there's probably going to be some kind of civil action from the family. So it's certainly not over for him yet.
And I also think it doesn't happen in reverse. If someone shoots a policeman, which is not uncommon, there's not mass public rallies to say leave the police alone, let them do their job, are there? But if they make the mistake, then they're on the back foot from the day one. You're almost guilty in many people's eyes before you've even started.
And they are very
tough.
vulnerable because in the States, there's no question about it that there are people carrying guns, and they're not afraid to use them. So you're absolutely right, Tom.
And the backdrop to all this, CNN gave some figures today, and the backdrop of the facts gives you an insight into why people are so upset. Young black men are 21 times more likely to be shot than white. There are 400 justifiable homicides by police every year. 400. And homicide is the number one killer of young black men. That's the backdrop of.
So you're looking at a society where there's an enormous amount of work to be done, really, isn't it? It's dysfunctional.
And there's a lot of states that have got a way to go. I know it was probably 15 years ago, 18 years ago, I worked for an Afro-American who was out here on 2 years, and I asked him once, had he been to all 50 states of America in his tours? He was a big traveller. He said there's still some states I wouldn't go to.
Wow.
And that was mid-80s.
I
there's some things that aren't going to be fixed.
Yeah.
As I say, for the last 100 years, it's not going to happen over the next 5
Still some states you wouldn't go to. I would not have believed the degree of racism if I hadn't been there and heard it from on the ground, And so having American connections, I wouldn't have believed it, but I was actually quite shocked. There are some people still living back in the 19th century.
And that's why I think people do question when this sort of incident happens, what else is involved, what's underlying.
Exactly.
And it's the business community, I think, in Ferguson that's really suffering now. It's on its knees, and people are completely at the end of their tether. That they'll be leaving if they haven't left already.
If you had a business which might have been struggling along, and you just have it mindlessly destroyed. How are you going to feel about that?
The ramifications are huge.
They are. There's not much we can do about it. We can be very sympathetic and recognise it for what it is. I think that's actually quite important in society to recognise what's going on. Staying in America, Tom, talk to us about Bill Cosby, a broadcaster of
extremely high repute.
Very high repute. International renown. What's going on here?
I just think this is another in the long line of huge disappointments for people that I know it's a terrible thing, you watch them on TV, you have a perception of what they're like, because that's the characters they're playing, and he was always such a good family man, and may still be, because there's still no guilt there, there's no trial there either, but it doesn't look good for him. But you look at I suppose there are icons when we were growing up, Rolf Harris and Bill Cosby, and you don't know what goes on behind closed doors, and what goes on tends to shock you even now, but they are being outed more, these people, by people coming forward, is the problem we've had before, that nobody used to come forward, and why they haven't, when there was apparently so many of them, why as soon as one comes forward, of course the others follow. And you've got to be a bit careful, because there might be one or two stray accusations that are absolutely not true, and of course those people in the public eye are immediately now almost assumed guilty because of the list of people that have failed. My question is why does someone, let's say, just theoretically, who's been accused of drugging women to have sex with them, TV superstars, why would they do that? Surely they're not short of female companionship, generally speaking. What's the driver for him and for Harris and those other guys?
Is it a power thing?
I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I mean, apart from being a huge disappointment to people that looked up to them as being nice people. It's just trying to get into the head of those people about why they would go to those lengths. Maybe for an extra buzz or thrill, or I don't understand.
Or maybe it was recreational, and it was all part and parcel of
the glamour
fun
package.
time. Maybe it wasn't to get them into bed, but it was just part of getting them. We'll do some drugs and then. But then that doesn't explain the
complaints afterwards, so if they partook in that in a recreational extent.
Perhaps there's a culture of thinking, because I'm who I am, I can get away with it, because that's certainly what was the case with Rolf Harris and
Jimmy Savile.
Jimmy Savile.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
he did.
He did.
Jimmy Savile was the one person who did get away with it,
Yeah.
because he died before anyone found out.
Yeah, right.
And of course, but everyone around them who's associated with them is now getting tarred with that brush. And there'll be some unfair accusations pitched at friends and family who weren't necessarily involved in the circle of deceit or whatever they were doing. But I think I think the Cosby one's going to shock the American nation, because he was Mr. Dr. Huxtable with the family, and
Mr. Clean.
he was always in the Mr. Clean shows. He was
Yeah,
always
he
in the
was.
clean shows. He was always the good guy, the nice guy. I hope it's not true, but it does. I have to say,
There seems to be a number of women now coming out who don't even know each other coming out of the
as soon as I hear an out-of-court settlement, if anyone accused me of that, I'd want you to go to court and clear my name. I wouldn't be paying you off, because it's touch and go. Just doesn't sound good, does it?
And the ones that I think one of the complainants is an ex-district attorney. I mean, a woman of some substance who was not known for fabricating things, or had no reason to fabricate anything.
So what took it so long?
You wonder.
Well, some of the people who are now coming out have said they did report it, and nobody took it seriously. And actually, there must have been rumours all through his career, because now the media and his biographer have come out and said, actually, we apologise because we glossed over this.
Right.
We knew it was there. We'd heard some rumours, and we'd heard whether they were only rumours or whether they were actual complaints, and they never took it up.
Never
And the
investigated
biographer said, I left this out of his biography, and I shouldn't have. So it obviously has been there, and people. The woman who's come forward the most, she said, "Why did nobody take me seriously when I tried to, to complain about this?" It took this comedian, this other male comedian, most recently, who sort of said, "Well, you're a rapist, Bill Cosby," for people to actually take it seriously. And this woman's saying, "Well, that's not. It's good that people have taken it seriously, but I've been trying to tell people for years, and nobody did."
I saw some comment that they reckon, the comment from some learned types in the media who said that'll be the end of his career, the guy who actually exposed the behaviour by saying that. They said that's the finish of him.
I doubt it.
No, I don't think
Not
so.
the way
I don't
it's
know
gone.
if I'd agree with that.
No, because now it's turned around on Bill Cosby.
Yes.
And actually, he talk about, PR and doing the wrong things with your PR. Did you hear that his people put out on social media when this happened, when the first sort of idea that he was in trouble came out? They put out on social media and said, "Here's a photo of Bill Cosby. This is from his people. Do a meme." You know what? Like a meme is usually, it's like a little song, sort of funny things cut together. But this one was just a photo, and people would have put captions on it. And everybody put on captions saying,
they would.
saying what he had done. But I think they thought it was going to be
win some friends,
that it would be in support of Bill Cosby, and it wasn't. So all these, memes then went out, and after a while they deleted it, took it off. Well, this isn't going well. Everybody's calling him
it is,
a naughty.
The thing which occurs to me is, we've seen these other ones we've talked about, but now it's fashionable is the wrong word. But now that the complainants seem to be successful in getting heard, I'm wondering if there'll be others will be exposed as well. I've no doubt that Bill Cosby isn't the only one in America, for example. There may be other ones where women or others are going to come forward and say, hey, what about so-and-so? This happened to me with them. Because for a start, I think Jimmy Savile was just the first one, probably.
Well, I think that's spread around the world about how effective it is when you do come forward.
Yeah.
That you are now going to be.
I don't think we've seen the end of it, have we?
And it's the similar stories that all the stories about people who, he'd go to a production meeting and take a 11-year-old child and sit them on their knee while a TV production meeting was going on. Nobody did anything about it.
Yeah.
Those sort of things. And there was a mountain of stories. The one by Lily Savage, the guy that plays Paul something, his name is, I can't recall, but he was a nurse in a hospital at one point, and there was a visit by the great Jimmy Savile, and the supervising nurse said, you go to that room, you don't leave the room without him. And he didn't understand at the time what was the point. He said he's not to be left in the room with the kids on his own. So obviously people had that suspicion, but that was 20 years ago.
It did nothing.
So it was, but now hopefully it'll stop it, because those people who are even thinking about it will think, well, even those big names didn't get away with it. There's no way that I'm going to. Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, that's a bit of a slippery slope.
It's a bit of a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Right, stick with us. We're going to take a short break. We will be back with topics of interest and one or two other things. See you soon. Welcome back to Newsroom. Bit of sport now. Tom, Daniel Vettori's been back in the news and playing Test cricket again. He's gone on for a long time, this guy, and the talent's still there. He's still doing what he ought to. It's a pretty impressive record, isn't it?
I think it was 17 years, I think, at Test level, and the most remarkable is not how often he's played, but his actual results. He's got more than 300 wickets and more than 4,000 runs, and there's only two other people ever in history that have done that. Kapil Dev is one, and Ian Botham is the other. Right. So we're talking about he's an absolutely stellar company. They're two of the best cricketers of all time. So his achievements have been massive. Obviously his body's just hanging on by a thread, and the circumstances have just come about where he can just play this test, if indeed, as we speak, he's starting that test, and probably will. And it'll be a nice way if we can somehow manufacture a win for him to actually hang up the boots officially. But great longevity. He's a spin bowler, of course, so they can take more punishment. But he's had some pretty bad injuries recently. But yeah, absolutely good on him for stepping up to the mark and helping out in a situation where we can do with a third spinner. I'm sure that's exactly what Carolyn was going to say.
Exactly. Perhaps she was going to comment about...
I take the words out of her mouth. Sorry, I jumped in there.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add.
A bit of a worry about the guy got hit on the head. The Aussie guy, Phil...
Shoes.
Taken off to hospital, family round. The thought occurred to me, was he actually hit on the helmet?
No, it sounds like it's hit in the back of the head, and there is a spot where the helmet doesn't come in tight. We're talking about a reasonably freakish injury.
Yes.
Because your body had to be at a certain place, he's misjudged the shot. And they're saying if you make a helmet that covers that area, they couldn't move their head and they couldn't play. So there's that balance. But you think about all the people that have been saved by the helmets over recent years. They're great things, and it's just an absolute. There's been a few times where the ball's gone through the grill. Yes. We're talking about a rocket at 100 miles an hour.
We are indeed.
So, and helmets like they are in the military sense are for deflections. They're not usually for full-on impact, and that's what he's suffered. It slipped through. It's hit him in the soft spot. It's missed all the protection. And unfortunately, it's a weakness, of course, in the human anatomy. Not a weakness, unless you're under that sort of stress. So we just wish him well. And hope he comes through and he bounces back. But it's the old days, no helmets at all.
You've got to take your hat off to them.
Well, or your helmet. But just how good these cricketers are dealing with those missiles. Yeah. And they were in the old days without the helmets, playing some pretty elaborate shots. Good on them for having the gumption, I'd say, in those days. Today it's a slightly easier game, but you're still not without risk.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, good on them. Carolyn, topic of interest.
So, yes, my topic of interest is I was delighted to see this article in the news. Actually, I didn't see it in the mainstream news. I think it was on Paul Henry. But
you'll think he's mainstream. Sorry, Paul. You are definitely mainstream. But Carolyn doesn't think so because you went on the red carpet.
So it was about this World War II heroine, Pippa Doyle, and just this little old lady, you know, in this awards ceremony. She's 93 and this sort of long white hair, and you can't imagine, you know, what she could have possibly done in the war. But she actually, she's English, and she was in some kind of women's auxiliary unit as a mechanic when she was 23, and they gave her a special mission, and they trained her up for it. And they actually dropped her into German-occupied France just prior to D-Day. And she landed in a field 3 fields over from where she was meant to land. And so there was an hour there where the resistance couldn't find her, and they thought that she could have been picked up by German patrols. And then she spent the next 3 months in German-occupied France, living rough, riding around on a bicycle, collecting information, wiring it back to the British. And then she obviously got out, you know, and got away, obviously. And she came to live in...
So she's made it to 93?
Yeah, that's right.
This is 70 years ago she did this. Yeah. And, you know, all the elements of that story are incredible, especially when you take into account the time, you know, the time and what women were doing at that time. So anyway, she was awarded by the French government's request. She's just been awarded the, what is the award called? The Legion French?
Legion of France or whatever.
Legion of Honour.
Legion
of Honour, yeah. So it's phenomenal. And the fact that she's just sort of living this life in New Zealand, and she's just a little, she appears to be a little old lady who's Mrs. Doyle.
She wasn't once though, Carolyn.
But I think it's fabulous that hasn't been forgotten. Yeah. Because I mean, we're talking about sporting courage. This is real courage. This is life and death. This is an important. I mean, just the fact that she was happy to go and start the question, not know how it was going to finish. We all know when the war ended and how things turned out, but at that stage, living day to day. Right. So I think it's marvellous that they track these people down and make sure they're acknowledged for things that are unquestionably brave.
And obviously the French government have
70 years later.
70 years later.
70 years later, yeah.
The French government, they're the ones that have requested it. So someone in some office somewhere in Paris has, I don't know, come across this and said, oh, this woman, she's 93, she deserves this honour, or whatever it is. But
good on them for trying to track her down.
Yeah.
But even if she had passed away, I think the family should have received it on their behalf. Let's not just, oh, well, she's gone. Well, I think that family deserved to know how brave their mother and grandmother and everything.
It seems to be the case. I've read other stories like this, that such people sometimes say, oh, it was just nothing, I was just doing, I really, I did that when I'm here now. And it's not that they minimise it, but they just don't consider really the tremendous job that they did. They don't put themselves forward. Incredible, really.
One of the things I remember about the 25-hour, 24-hour, 26 hours, I should say.
Yes, right.
During that time that Tim brought up, he said during that war, or during those wars, it's not necessarily the rugby captain, the soldier, the lifetime soldier, career soldier that were the bravest of the war. There were plenty of examples of that. It was sometimes the librarian or the book clerk or the the lady who worked in the corner shop. They had just as much influence, but perhaps not recognised as readily. And that's a shining example of someone who was probably just almost minding her own business, working away as a mechanic, and suddenly she was a crucial, small but crucial part of the war.
They trained her up in all sorts of things, weapons and combat, Morse code, all that stuff.
Goodness me.
Then dropped her into German-occupied France.
Be interesting to know what the rest of the story is, what she did when she came home. Did she just get married and have kids, be a normal person?
Possibly, yeah.
Amazing.
Don't know, but I think growing up with that in your family, you find it hard to convince anyone else that was true.
Yes, yeah.
Especially when they don't talk about it and boast about it. Yeah. I mean, it's just something you had to do at the time. But I think you just win the war, you adapt to war circumstances, and whatever you have to do, you have to do.
Yeah. Some incredible stories.
Don't lose your microphone, Bill. You might have something intelligent to say. We would miss it.
That would be terrible, Tom. In the meantime, you can talk and tell us
You can fix that.
Yeah, tell us about your topic of interest.
Well, a couple of brief ones. One, we're really happy to see University Challenge launched after a long time.
Absolutely.
We
yes.
actually, all that work that went in from people for 12 months in the preparation started on Prime at 11:30 on Saturday and continues at that time. So lots of really good feedback.
It's great.
Lots of really good feedback about it, and it'll be interesting to see how the market reacts to it, because it is something completely different. It is not a reality show. It's not that kind of lots of prizes and flashing lights, and it's people sitting down and having thinking and performing. And the students were absolutely marvellous. And as the series continues and they warm up and they really start to contribute in terms of having some fun as well, but never losing that testing streak, it turns into a very good series, which we're very proud of. So, I hope that people just lock in and watch it, lock it into your series link on your My Sky and your Freeview recorders, will help the numbers and help perhaps us having a second season. It's interesting because it's 25 years old, the same format. Whether it's as good today, it is. It's worked well in Britain as a renaissance. No reason it shouldn't work here, and I know the students went home waxing lyrical about it and telling their fellow students to have a go at this because it's something different and fresh. So let's.
Well, I've already heard good feedback of people who've watched it and said, I'm so glad it's back on. I always used to sit down and watch it. It's a great show, and people, I think they have a sense of participation. It's the one thing which we can do that we can become part of it. It's the ultimate reality show.
Well, that's the one question that always comes up. What do you do different, Tom, in the production of it to last time? What we've done is made the questions slightly less highbrow. So the whole opportunity is for someone to sit at home, and they can't answer them all, but every time that section comes up, they can ask one or two, they can compete with the
There's
students.
Still a good challenge there.
And have some fun with it. And to pack in, and that's the other feedback we got, pack in as many questions as you can.
Yes.
And programs like Millionaire are all good, but you only actually get in a dozen questions in half an hour. People want to sit there and just answer questions and just not worry about the rest of it. So we drilled them. We drilled those questions, 75 a show, to get them into a commercial half hour. So we hope that's what they told us they want. That's what we produced.
Could be the start of an ongoing thing for the next few years. Hopefully.
Well, we've certainly got 2 more years if we wish. But it'll come down to response, and if people enjoy it, we'll make more.
One of the things I really like, this is my own personal view on University Challenge, is that it gives knowledge a place in our society that I believe it should have. Actually knowing things, knowing stuff. It sort of has been a little bit belittled in the education system in recent times. And so when students get through to university, they find actually we do need to know quite a lot of stuff to get a university degree. So it's very good from that point of view.
And I think they've impressed, even though they have one show, that people at home thought those students who are often maligned, up and in the bus, that what do they know? They sit around at university. These are clever people who are going to be the leaders in this country, and many of them are going to be the doctors and they have responsible positions, and they do know stuff. They knew a lot of stuff. And it was interesting, at the beginning of the series, we didn't know what they knew and what they didn't know. And so we had a real broad brush of subjects. And it was very strong in science and geography, and history was quite good. Not so much New Zealand literature, things that perhaps in our day, Bill through school, which was pressed quite hard. Maybe that's not such a big push these days. So it was interesting to see what they knew. But they had a very good general knowledge, and I think they, as they grew in confidence in playing the game, they were happy to jump in and anticipate, and they're impressed.
Well, they
nice
impressed,
people,
their
great
knowledge
people.
impressed me. Sitting there and watching some of the sessions there, I was very impressed by them. Do watch it; it's really worthwhile. On that very happy note, we're going to end the show. Be looking out for us again in a fortnight's time, because we'll be back as we always are with Newsroom. See you then.